Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Our program is about to begin. As a courtesy to the presenters and your fellow attendees, please silence all mobile devices. Thank you.
Good morning. Welcome to everyone. The 2023 Inter-Service Industry Training Simulation and Education Conference is now called to order. I'm Elliot Weiner from Iowa State University, and I'm honored this year to have served as your conference chair. To active and retired general and flag officers, members of the Office of the Secretary of Defense, esteemed members of Congress, distinguished guests, representatives of allied nations, exhibitors and attendees from government, industry, and academia. On behalf of the United States Army and the entire conference committee, I welcome you to the world's largest modeling, training, simulation, and education event, Itsec 2023. Joining me on stage is the Army Executive, Ms. Karen Saunders, the Program Executive Officer for Simulation and Training and Instrumentation, PEO STRI. In December 2014, Ms. Saunders culminated a 30-year honorable career in the U.S. Army as a colonel, serving as the Chief of Staff for the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Acquisition, Logistics, and Technology. She has had numerous distinguished postings, including Executive Director of the Defense Science Board, the Program Manager for the DoD STEM Development Office, and prior to her current position, she served as the Chief of Staff for the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment. In her current role as a Program Executive Officer for Simulation, Training, and Instrumentation, Ms. Saunders oversees a multi-billion-dollar portfolio, leading more than 1,200 military, government civilian, and service support contractors. The organization also manages foreign military sales programs for over 65 countries. It's my pleasure to welcome Ms. Karen Saunders, our lead service executive. We will now post the colors, followed by the national anthem sung by Captain, United States Navy retired, Bill Roto-Rooter, and Commander, United States Navy retired, Hank Phillips, and an invocation offered by Mr. Jesse Citizen. Ms. Saunders, if you would please present the colors. Everyone, please stand.
Post the colors.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Please join me in today's invocation. Almighty Father, we gather here from across the globe, united in our purpose to serve and support our operations and warfighters. We are grateful for the opportunity to participate in this year's Inter-Service Industry Training Simulation Education Conference, recognizing that it is not by chance that we are here today. We are thankful and ask blessing for each of the individuals in this room and those traveling to join us for today's Itsec journey. We are thankful for the sacrifices that many have made to be here this week amidst the financial and other global challenges we face. We are humbled by the unwavering dedication of the National Defense Industrial Association, National Training Simulation staff, Itsec Conference and Program Chairs, executive staff, international military, industry, and academia partners, and all those involved in the volunteer subcommittees that ensure the success of Itsec. We are particularly grateful for the leadership of the Army's political, senior executive service, and its military leaders. We pray for continued wisdom for our presidents, the members of Congress, the Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, Coast Guard, Space Force, and federal civilians. Dear God, we ask you, as we reflect on today's event, to remember Admiral Jim Robb, President of the NTSA, who passed on November 1st. We thank him for his legacy and dedication to the Itsec mission. We ask you for your protection for those serving here and their families at home and abroad, and those military, industry, and academia members representing the countries attending Itsec. We are thankful for Itsec, one of the largest events that bring together so many remarkable people to do great things. Lord of wisdom, we ask that you work mightily in us today and throughout this week. May this conference be a source of inspiration and motivation, igniting our passion for innovation and excellence. May we leave feeling empowered to make a lasting impact on the world around us. Amen.
Please be seated. So how about that rendition of the national anthem, huh? So I'd like to direct your attention to this year's theme video.
We live in a digital age, a digital world. Our forces fight on land, air, sea, space, and cyber. To maintain the modern edge, our military forces must adapt to an ever-changing digital landscape. Future wars will be won by those who embrace readiness, cutting-edge technologies, training, testing, and operational concepts. Our warfighters will train with the latest in augmented and virtual platforms, using AI that fights like a near-peer adversary, that adapts to changing tactics and strategies. Industry, academia, and the military are building global partnerships to blend approaches and develop competitive and innovative technologies to train and sustain our military forces in the spectrum of conflict within the digital battle space. A space that's dynamic, vast, and moves at record speeds. At the tactical edge, where humans meet machines, our partnerships are enabling the warfighter by creating domains that sharpen skills and advance capabilities across the multi-spectrum battlefield. Immersive training environments, digital force management, offensive and defensive cyber system platforms, and sustainment of global forces. Tomorrow's battle space is here, and our military forces must be ready to ensure our nation's security through sustainment of a global presence in a digital world. The future is here.
So, it's a big room. I'm going to tell you that right now. I'm a little academic. We're not used to this, but I'm going to do my best. A little over 2.5 years ago, the world changed forever. A global event that had previously only been seen in movies, read about in science fiction, became a reality. I know many of us don't even want to think about that time again. I know I don't. But we persevered as a species, as a planet, as a people, and even in this conference, because we ran the conference in 2020 and 2021. And in Itsec 2022, led by Conference Chair Matt Spruill and Program Chair Jim Threlfall, and the Lead Service United States Air Force, was one of our biggest ever. As I look out over the audience right now, it's inspiring to think of all the challenges this community has overcome. And it gives me certainty that we can tackle the challenges that we have yet to face. But unfortunately, we've been faced with another tough event already. One that none of us never anticipated, the loss of our friend, mentor, and leader, the President of the NTSA, Rear Admiral U.S. Navy retired, James A. Robb. Admiral Robb passed away a little less than 4 weeks ago, a loss that many of us are still struggling to comprehend. In the leadership roles that I've held in the last few years, several times I gave remarks to groups with Admiral Robb in attendance. And for those that knew him, we know there are certain things he approves of and certain things he doesn't. And for those that know me, you know that I sometimes like to push the boundaries a bit. My style would mildly clash with what I'll call Robb's rules, a few of which are, don't keep thanking people over and over again. It's enough already. A little humor is okay, but keep it mostly business, Elliot. We got a schedule to keep. Don't eat during awards presentations. We don't want to hear the clink clink of your silverware. Remember that for Thursday. And when in doubt, listen to Debbie Langelier. She'll always tell you what to do. He'd come up to me after my remarks, and the statement I heard more than once was, you push it pretty close to the line, Elliot, but you never seem to go over it. Well, in that spirit, I'm going to do it again. Because I'd be remiss to not take a few minutes to talk about a man that I consider a mentor and most importantly, a friend. Jim Robb was appointed a midshipman in the Naval Reserve Officers Training Program on 22 September 1969. He was promoted to lieutenant in July 1976. In between deployments, he led the first F-14 section to attend Top Gun and later returned as a Top Gun instructor. And in April 1990, assumed duty as commanding officer of Naval Fighter Weapons School. One amazing feat recorded is that he recovered from a fully developed flat spin, believed to be the only F-14 pilot to ever have done so. Admiral Robb's awards include the Defense Distinguished Service Medal, the Defense Superior Service Medal, the Legion of Merit 4 times, the Defense Meritorious Service Medal, the Meritorious Service Medal 3 times, Air Medal with numeral 2, the Navy Commendation Medal, and the Navy Achievement Medal. And there are many, many more. His list of accomplishments, accolades, and awards is truly the most impressive I've ever seen. And with all of this, his aviator nickname of Rookie couldn't be more ironic. When Admiral Robb took the job as president of the NTSA, he took on new missions, one that were near and dear to his heart, furthering the training capabilities for our warfighters. He would say over and over how we were the experts, not him, how we were the ones who were going to solve the continual challenges that came up in training and simulation. I don't think any of us actually believed he didn't have expertise in this area. I know I didn't. But we'd all smile, we'd nod along with him as he would say these things. But in truth, he had skills to create a vision for the future of training and simulation that few of us could match. He also had a unique way of executing that vision with steady leadership, amounts of patience that I still can't understand where all that came from, a firm hand when needed, and unwavering support to each and every one of us in this community. However, his most important mission to this community was revealed in something he would say over and over, and that I and my program chair, Dr. Annie Little, really took to heart. And that's how we're not a community, we're a family. As I look around this room to my friends, many of whom I consider my family, it's easy to say he accomplished his mission. All right, I've gone on long enough because I can feel his eyes boring in on me right now saying, enough, move it along, we got to get back to the mission at hand, and that's running this conference, which we will do this week in his honor. Our theme, sustaining a global force in the digital world, couldn't be more relevant this year. It seems technological breakthroughs and the underlying educational, social, and training issues that go with them seem to be occurring almost daily. Advances in extended reality, computational models, learning strategies, team-based curriculums, and acquisition methods are coming fast and furious. And let's not forget about our buddy ChatGPT, doing everything from passing college admissions exams to upending the entertainment industry. I mean, I miss my shows this fall, don't you? Itsec is where it all comes together. The breadth of content offerings this conference is just staggering to me every year. As an academic who has devoted his career to research, attending conferences is a built-in part of my job, and I've gone all over the world and done them, and I can tell you there's no event like this one. We welcome people from around the globe, from hardcore programmers to executives and managers, from warfighters to first responders, from educators to researchers, and everything in between. Other conferences say they have something for everyone. We truly mean it. The program you're going to experience for the next several days is a result of the astounding efforts of 300 volunteers from government, industry, and academia. These volunteers, along with the staff of the NTSA, worked an extraordinary amount of hours over this past year. I thank each and every one of them for their efforts. The team was led by my wonderful program chair, Dr. Annie Little, and they've put together a world-class program with 149 paper sessions, 31 tutorials, 8 professional development workshops, and a staggering 42 special events. For the technology addicted, our show floor is bigger than ever this year, over 200,000 square feet and over 450 companies. The exhibit floor will also house our service booths, the Cyber Pavilion, Serious Games Showcase and Challenge, the ecosystem of learning, and many others. So the Itsec website has all the latest information. We also developed personas this year and sample itineraries if you're new to the conference. In addition, grab the mobile app and it has all the conference content there as well. We'll have a range of activities and events for our future leaders. These include programs for America's teachers and students, a career fair, and student virtual tours. We will honor many individuals this week, starting with our 2023 Itsec Fellow, Dr. James Wall. Being elected Fellow is the highest honor in our community from the NTSA. Congratulations, Dr. Wall. We will honor many scholarships this week as well, starting with our Admiral Fred Lewis Scholarship recipients, followed by our Leonard P. Gollobin Scholarship recipients, and our Barbara McDaniel Undergraduate Scholarship recipients. Get ready for it. All told, we'll be giving out $180,000 this week in scholarships. And lastly, we'll introduce a new award this year, the NTSA Top 10 Under 40, recognizing the best up-and-coming leaders in the M&S community. And of course, for you runners out there, definitely not one of you. There's still time to register for the 5K Wednesday morning. All proceeds benefit the Tunnel to Towers and STEM initiative. So please come out and run, walk, or roll, or just be with me and we'll hand out waters and whatever else they tell me to do. As I wrap up my remarks, I have a challenge for each and every one of you, and that's to be part of the solutions. Many of us live and breathe the challenges our warfighters and first responders face, but many attendees may be here for different reasons. You may be someone just wanting to see the latest uses in XR or machine learning, just walk the exhibit floor to see all the technological advances. Whatever your corner of the world is, I promise you, it can help with our readiness challenges. Our very freedoms rely on maintaining our readiness in this ever-changing digital world, and your accomplishments can help tremendously. So again, be part of the solutions. It's now my honor to recognize a few of the distinguished guests who helped make this conference the premier training simulation education conference in the world. Please note the individuals for this morning's senior leader panel will be introduced during that event. For our fireside chat, our moderator, the Honorable Katrina McFarland, PhD, Vice Chair, Army Science Board. And our speaker is the Honorable Douglas R. Bush, Assistant Secretary of the Army, Acquisition, Logistics, and Technology, and General Gary M. Brito, Commanding General, U.S. Army Training and Doctrine Command, TRADOC. And I would ask, we'll hold our applause until I finish all the rest of the names. We have a few to get through here. Our academic keynote speaker, Dr. Doug Bowman, the Frank J. Mayer Professor of Computer Science and Director of the Center for Human-Computer Interaction at Virginia Tech. From NDIA, the Honorable David Norquist, President and Chief Executive Officer, the Honorable Michael Baer, Chairman of the Board, Brigadier General, United States Air Force retired, Guy Walsh, Executive Vice President, and Rear Admiral Fred Lewis, United States Navy retired and former NTSA President. The Army Executive, Ms. Karen Saunders, United States Army Program Executive Officer, Simulation, Training, Instrumentation, and the Army Principal, Ms. Debbie Dawson. The Sea Service Executives, Captain Tim James, Commanding Officer, United States Navy, Naval Air Warfare Center, Training Systems Division, and the Navy Principal, Mr. Kent Gritton. Colonel Marcus Reynolds, United States Marine Corps, Program Manager for Training Systems, Marine Corps Systems Command, and the Marine Corps Principal, Ms. Carol Byers-Bendel. The Air Force Executive, Colonel Matt Ryan, United States Air Force Chief, Simulators Program Office, Air Force Material Command, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and the Air Force Principal, Mr. Heath Morton. And from the Office of the Secretary of Defense, Mr. Greg Knapp, Chief, Strategy and Training, Office of the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Force Education and Training, and the OSD Principal, Dr. Fred Engel. I am truly humbled to have served as your conference chair this year. This conference, and more importantly, the people in it, all of you, have become such an integral part of my professional and personal life. I look forward to a tremendous conference this week, and again, let me welcome you to Itsec 2023. I now turn things over to Ms. Karen Saunders, our Army Executive.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Elliot. Such great words this morning, and thank you for the tribute to Admiral Robb. I really feel the excitement in the area here in the Orange County Convention Center for Itsec 2023. This is going to be a phenomenal week, and Elliot already talked about the multiple opportunities, so I hope everyone takes advantage of those. On behalf of NTSA, I'd like to join them in welcoming all of our congressional members, our DoD officials, our senior military leaders, representatives from our coalition and partner nations, industry members, academic members, and most especially our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marine, Guardian, and Coast Guardsmen. It is truly an honor to represent the United States Army as the lead service for this year's Itsec. The Army has been a leader in modeling and simulation for many years, and we are definitely doing our part at sustaining a global force in a digital world. The Army's priorities are people, modernization, and readiness. And simulation and training are key components of our overall modernization efforts. I have no doubt this year's conference will provide unlimited opportunities to learn and share information among the variety of stakeholders who are in attendance this week. So we like to think of modernization through agile acquisition as a team sport. And it requires representatives from our requirements community, from our test community, our contracting community, certainly the efforts of our partnership with industry and academia. The open communication between military, industry, and academia that this conference provides fits well into our team sport philosophy. I would encourage you to take full advantage of all the seminars, panels, educational sessions, and social events over the next few days. I think that they will provide extremely beneficial to both you personally as well as to the success of our current and future missions. We live in uncertain times and in an era of great power competition with our adversaries. Army modernization is key to building the Army of 2030 and for designing and planning the Army of 2040 and beyond. So this is where I'm going as the lead service for Itsec. This is where I'm going to make a shameless plug to come visit the Army booth, booth 3235, which we're calling Army Central this year. We have got some great products to show you from both the acquisition side as well as our developmental command. Within the PEO STRI booth, we are highlighting our next generation for Army training, the synthetic training environment. We'll have demonstrators such as the reconfigurable virtual collective trainer. We'll have Stinger and mortars, and of course, the persistent cyber training environment, as well as a squad immersive virtual trainer shoot house. So come on down and see us. My team is going to be very happy to show you the portfolio of products that we're building for our Army soldiers today. In addition to that, we'll talk to you about our portfolio of products that we really kind of define in five areas, if you will. The first is institutional training. Second is home station training, combat training centers, sustainment and maintenance, and training alongside our allies and partners. Every soldier in the United States Army uses a PEO STRI testing, training, or threat product or service throughout their military career. So if you can't find us, go to the Service Quad booth and you'll see combat boot prints taking you down to Army Central. So please come by and see us. Can't miss us, 56-foot semi-trailer with a big STRI logo. We look forward to seeing you. And really, we want you to come and see how we are advancing today's training and defeating tomorrow's threats. So as much as I'd like to continue to talk about what the Army and PEO STRI is doing this year and the incredible capabilities we're developing for our soldiers, it is my honor to introduce the members of our Army Fireside Keynote speech this morning. I do want to say thank you to Admiral Robb for his mentorship throughout this year. As I was pulling together this fireside chat, I had these great ideas on who we were going to bring in, and luckily, through his tutelage and mentoring, we got some phenomenal participants this year. So as I introduce them, please hold your applause until the end. The first is Honorable Douglas R. Bush. Honorable Bush was confirmed by the United States Senate as the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Acquisition, Logistics, and Technology on February 9th, 2022. In addition to his role as Army Acquisition Executive, Senior Procurement Executive, and advisor to the Secretary of the Army, Honorable Bush is responsible for managing an Army acquisition workforce of more than 33,000 members. This includes overseeing 12 program executive offices for armaments and ammunition, missiles and space, ground combat systems, intelligence, electronic warfare and sensors, the soldier, and last but not least, simulation, training, and instrumentation. Honorable Bush began his career as an officer in the United States Army and then served as a congressional staff member for almost 19 years, working in a variety of positions in both the U.S. Senate and House of Representatives, including several positions in the House Armed Services Committee. Welcome, Mr. Bush. General Gary M. Brito. General Brito assumed duties as the 18th Commanding General, United States Army Training and Doctrine Command on September 8, 2022. He is responsible for building and sustaining a highly trained, disciplined, and fit Army by acquiring the best people, training the most lethal soldiers, developing the most professional leaders, guiding the Army's culture, and shaping our future force. General Brito's distinguished career includes serving as the Army's Deputy Chief of Staff for Personnel. He's also served in a variety of command positions and has multiple deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. Welcome, sir. The Honorable Katrina McFarland. Our moderator this morning is Honorable McFarland. With over 30 years of government service, which includes almost 25 years serving with the United States Marine Corps, Honorable McFarland is widely recognized as a leading subject matter expert in government procurement. She serves as the Vice Chair of the Army Science Board, as well as Director of several industry boards. She is the former Assistant Secretary of Defense for Acquisition and has served as an acting Assistant Secretary of the Army for Acquisition, Logistics, and Technology. Welcome, Ms. McFarland. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Honorable Bush, General Brito, and Honorable McFarland.
Thank you. Okay, can you all hear me? What a fabulous crowd. I'm so honored to be here and especially honored to be able to moderate for these esteemed gentlemen and their team of Army going for training and making sure the Army soldiers are ready and supplied. I'm going to echo for a moment the earlier discussion about Admiral Jim Robb. What a loss. I understand some of his family will be here, and I want to pass on our respect to them and gratitude for his service. And I understand this has been dedicated to him, rightfully so. My personal experience with him was just recently, where he helped advise me on what to ask our panel members. And unbeknownst to me, he was in a hospice and passed right afterwards. So his dedication truly was a passion. So enough sobriety. Let's move on to what's so important to us today. So we have two members of the Army here. And as Karen introduced them, they have a very important role to play as part of the Team Army. So what I discussed with them, and we're going to enact out here for you, is I'm going to let them give about 5-10 minutes, whatever time they need, to talk about what's important to them, and then we'll ask questions. And my understanding is, and somebody can correct me from the team if I'm wrong, is there'll be notes for you to be able to ask questions that we'll take at the last 10 minutes, like around 9:20 or so, to ask them, maybe a little early if we can move along. So please, I encourage you, if there's things that you have a burning desire to understand, let's see if we can't get them up here and entertain answering questions that are so important to our future. So, General Brito, I'm going to start with you. You're right to my right.
Okay.
If you would give some thoughts.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today. And it's indeed an honor to, spend some time with you this morning and my distinguished panel members as well. I would like to expand just a little bit on the mission statement that Mrs. Saunders talked about for the United States Army Training and Doctrine Command. Just to give a little context, one, for our joint partners in the audience today, and our industry partners as well. I do have the honor, as mentioned, of commanding the United States Army Training and Doctrine Command, which is responsible for not only the accessions of, but training the most lethal soldiers and developing competent, proficient leaders so that our Army can continue to contribute as a global fighting force in support of joint operations. And I don't say that to be doctrinally geeky, but I do say that to underscore the importance of what the command does in partnership with our joint partners, our other commands across the United States Army, and of course the support of our industry partners. And just to recap a bit, the command operates along 5 lines of operation. sessions, and our piece of that, bringing in the best soldiers of the for all three components in the United States Army. All that is necessary with training those most lethal soldiers, one upon entry and throughout the career. And that's very important, and it hooks to the support that we have with our industry partners that I'm looking at today, and of course the support that we give and need from our joint partners as well. Developing the most proficient, well-trained leaders across the Army, not only when they come in as second lieutenants, but throughout the context of their professional career. That's very important as well. And two that may not seem to hook into readiness, but clearly have a big importance: shaping Army culture and helping to guide the future force of the United States Army. And I use that last one to connect to the purpose and outcome possibly of this conference today. And that, what I would like to mention, I was mentioning some of the opening remarks, a lot of what we do is very much a team sport and future force development of the United States Army, and I'm sure the other services can relate to that as well. The acquisition, the working with our industry partners, clearly defined, precisely written requirements, which would be as important to our industry partners as well. And unique to what the command does, working with our other ACOMs, other Army commands, the integration of our, I'll throw the first acronym out, the integration of our DOTLM PF, the doctrine, organization, training, leader development, people, facilities, and of course material. And material can be looked at as a big M and a small m, and we'll talk to that, I'm sure, throughout the context of the panel today. So leveraging all those capabilities, working with our sister services, working with the other commands across the United States Army, and of course our distinguished Army civilian staff, and clearly working well-defined requirements for our industry partners, allows us to develop and maintain the readiness in the Army that we need now, working part of our joint force as well. And as mentioned in the opening remarks, focus on the requirements of Army 2030, which in many respects is next week, and of course developing the concepts and capabilities we need for 2040 and beyond. So with that, I look forward to the opportunity to speak to you the rest of the morning. Thank you.
Thank you, General. Honorable Bush, your thoughts.
Sure. First, welcome everybody. You're getting a healthy dose of Army early in the morning in large quantity. It's kind of the Army way. But really glad to be here. It's an honor and thrilled to be here with my joint colleagues. So they don't always gather us in one place too often. We normally have separate conferences in DC, so it's great to have a joint one here with our teammates in the Joint Force and OSD. So let me talk briefly about the context of overall Army equipment modernization, and then a little bit more about focus areas in the training domain. So the context is really previous administration initiated a large number of modernization programs with a goal of trying to, over time, fundamentally and rapidly modernize Army equipment in a new direction to reshape the Army for its role against the threats we face today. This administration, we've largely carried on that plan because it was a good one, including, I'll get to it, the great work going on, a lot of really awesome success stories, quiet success stories in the training domain. But that overall effort focused on additional, for example, long-range fires, air and missile defense, network, soldier lethality. We've now built upon that and training. We've now built upon that to start adding some other things. So you may have seen a new focus on logistics and contested logistics, a new focus on intelligence gathering, a new focus on cyber. So the plan is on track. We are doing well overall, not without its challenges. And industry, we have to work with industry, and we are working well. But I'm happy to take criticisms or ideas or thoughts when we get to the Q&A about what we could be doing better. So that's the big picture, and the Army is committed serious resources to this and remains committed to it. So within the training domain, we've got three major efforts, and then within each one there are several parts. So first of all, the umbrella idea of the synthetic training environment was one that the Army worked on before I arrived. We've continued, that tries to coordinate and synchronize development of a range of different training tools, all the way down from individual soldier systems to collective training at the division and higher levels. All in a synthetic environment, all connected, all using the same data, all able to work together seamlessly. So that compares to the past where we have terrific training systems today, but they've been kind of cobbled together over time. We make it work in true Army fashion. We overcome the discontinuities with just brute force, and our folks do great, but we want to make things easier for our leaders and our commanders and our soldiers. So that overall effort runs a wide gamut, but it includes everything from new training devices all the way up to, like I said, mass collective training. Another major effort going on is a new focus on providing training at an enhanced level for intelligence and electronic warfare. So recognizing that those two areas and those two domains are more important than ever, fighting against potential sophisticated enemies with like capabilities, the ability to actually train those soldiers to do intel and EW at a high level of fidelity has always been a challenge. It's difficult to replicate those environment, always has been. My other services wrestle with the same challenge, but we're on a path now to develop a new system to allow intel and EW people to train at a high level of fidelity in a simulated environment. And another I'd mention is cyber. So the persistent cyber training environment, here again, a very difficult thing to train because the first of all, sometimes classification levels, but also the ability to have a representative threat that is truly challenging to an operator has always been a difficult one. But this new effort, I think, is making great strides to actually having a cyber training capability that is meaningful and challenging and something we can adapt over time. So that's broadly what we're doing in the area of developing systems for General Brito and his terrific team to actually train the Army. That's our role in acquisition. We're a support element. We are here to support the Army. It's a team, and we are doing our part as part of that team. Other thing I'd mention is some new tools we're using in acquisition. So here I'll go down a level to some things that are new ways of doing things that we're trying to do. The first one is take advantage of recent flexibilities Congress provided. So my years on the Hill, toward the end of those years, there was a concerted effort to try to provide the department and the services with new, more flexible acquisition pathways and tools so we can just do things faster and better. That imperative for speed is what was behind those reforms from Congress. That concern and the willingness to provide more authority and flexibility is based on a concern that our enemies are moving quickly in these areas. We have to go faster. So doing that responsibly in acquisition is the challenge, but we're doing it. And we're fully embracing these new acquisition tools. The first one is middle tier of acquisition, which just lets us not shortcut, but accelerate a lot of the traditional processes in the department to actually get real things on contract with you here in industry so we can actually get stuff to General Brito to train with. So cutting years out of the acquisition cycle was the main goal of that system, and I think we're going to have some big successes coming up. Ms. Saunders and her team, you can go see them, where we have used those authorities, and we're going to get new training equipment in far faster than we've done in the past to the field. The other one, and I will defer all difficult questions on software and AI to my terrific deputy, Mr. Young Bang, who's going to be doing a panel later, but it's the software pathway. So in some ways more radical even than middle tier. It's actually, though, for our industry colleagues here, it's the government trying to actually do software the way industry already does it. So we want to meet you where you already work. So this is doing software fundamentally differently. It is a very streamlined process. It focuses on getting initial code, initial products, not in a matter of years, but in a matter of months, and then iterating on them indefinitely to keep up, which is how industry works in the software field. We're adapting to that. We want to meet you where you already hopefully are. That requires a different approach to contracting. It requires flexibility and very close work with our requirements partners, including General Brito and his whole team, to make sure that when we're doing this fast, we are actually doing what the soldiers want and what General Brito and his team need to train the Army. But compared to the old way of 5 or 6 years and then cranking out a product that was already outdated when we produced it, we've got to change, and we are changing. So those two areas are where I think we're fundamentally doing acquisition different to try to, frankly, keep up with innovation in the industry and the needs of the Army, which we're just, again, in a faster pace than we used to be. And we in acquisition have to adapt our way of doing things to meet that demand, and I think we're doing that. So I think I'll leave it there. I really look forward to Q&A, but it's an exciting time. The Army's doing a lot very quickly. It's not all perfect, but we need feedback. It's one thing I want to get this week being here from our colleagues in industry, but also learn from the other services and what they're doing. So it's one team, but look forward to the Q&A. Thanks.
Thank you. Well, that gives me a lot of gist to ask questions. And I particularly appreciate the discussion about articulate requirements, because as my old acquisition hat on, there can be nothing better than having a clear understanding that you want to convey to industry.
Yeah, we got General Brito surrounded by acquisition.
I noticed that. That's
We love you. So let's go to requirements. You've recently released FM 3.0, and I understand you're working it closely with FM 2.0, which also excites me, intelligence-based operations and requirements to help train and ready our soldiers. This is a lot of work for the Army. Are there priorities? Do you have a strategic plan in place?
Well, yes, it is a lot of work. And I would highlight, it was a year ago, FM 3.0 operations came out, rolled out in conjunction with AUSA that's 2 months ago now, FM 2.0 intelligence. And we're working on an aggressive path to have one of logistics sustainment, 4.0 coming out soon. Now, I mentioned the titles for this reason. You can't, and you shouldn't, separate operations from intelligence. It was mentioned the great work we're doing in the logistics world as well, so why not publish doctrine as a guide connected to those warfighting functions, which helps drive all that our Army needs to do, working with the Joint Force to be capable, fight and win, and we will, in a multi-domain operations. Now, tied to that, the priorities are very much tied to our secretaries and our chiefs' priorities. One, the ones mentioned in the opening remarks, but two, just to have a warfighting ready Army. And I hate to put it in simple grunt terms, but that involves a lot. And it's really not all that simple. So tied to that doctrine, the priorities would be, and very much tied to the acquisition and the modernization timelines process as well. So we'll have supporting ATPs, we'll have supporting training plans, we'll have the doctrine, training plans, manuals, circulars, whatever you want to call them, tied to our modernization also. Just as a small exemplar, Honorable Bush mentioned the soldier lethality cross-functional team and some others that are helping to work some of our modernization. So as that team should develop a new weapon, for illustration, I'll just call it a new rifle. No need to go into depth. It's important that this command, working with the Army Command, Futures Command, and others, links in early to develop the doctrine, the organization, the training, the leader development, the integration I mentioned in the opening remarks tied to that piece of kit, so that the kit in itself is not just out there. And when you do that, you enhance the lethality of the individual soldier, you improve the lethality, the collective training of the respective unit, you improve their performance when they go to a combat training center. I'm putting this in broad strokes, but ultimately all those together, when an individual as part of the unit deploys or organization deploys supporting a joint force operation anywhere in the world, he or she and that unit will be lethal, and that's what we want. They're going to fight and win and come back. So that underscores the importance of all that I just mentioned up front, and the doctrine's a guide to help get us there. And lastly, tied to Honorable Bush's points, we need to do it fast and continue to do it fast. One, to keep up with the pace of modernization, but more importantly, keep up and have that overmatch that we need as an Army and a joint force over our adversaries. Waiting for doctrine to take a year and a half or more isn't going to work. Right. Supporting the acquisition timeline that's going to take 4 or 5 in the past, several years, isn't going to work, because we need to maintain that overmatch over our adversaries, and that's what's most important. To close where I started, to hook that back to the FM that you mentioned, that underscores the importance of the doctrine and operations, intelligence, as you mentioned, in 2.0, and we need to put it out fast, working as part of the team in supporting our modernization efforts. Thanks.
Fabulous. I'm excited. I hear Army's Future Command talk about human-machine integration and the concept of making 1 + 1 = 3 in terms of performance and capabilities. So the maturing of how you train and how you use technology to support training and how you build that out as a team. Honorable Bush has a large play, and not coincidentally has put out some really impressive impressive new requirements in this digital world. And I think of PE Strive's Common Synthetic Environment that just put out a recent procurement activity, and the advanced program IVAS putting out the next technology upgrade. Are you seeing Army get access to the tools that it needs, the technology that it needs? Is industry seeing and getting in front of you and saying, here's what we can do?
I mean, broadly, yes. I think this is where, the innovation in this country and the innovation in defense industry, we depend on it. We rely on it. Every answer should not be the Army telling industry exactly how we're going to do something. We need to hear from them. We need the innovation that's coming from the private sector. And I think we're getting that. So broadly, yes. I think the challenge the Army has is just, as always, it's just resources. How do we allocate resources to modernize quickly while in this area of training, for example, while trying to do everything else? But to bring it back to General Brito's point briefly, and it's absolutely true, the Army doesn't send equipment to war. We send units of soldiers with equipment. Everything has to be built around a formation that has a mission to do, rather than a piece of equipment. It's a bit of a different approach. It's just the way the Army's built. And I think we've done a better job recently, but it's always a struggle to make sure that we are starting an acquisition program and thinking about the training part up front, especially when we're doing it faster. You can have a terrific piece of gear, but if it's very difficult to train, it's just not going to be as effective, or if it's too expensive to train on, it's not going to be as affordable for the Army to do at scale. And everything the Army does is at vast scale. Millions of people, hundreds of thousands of soldiers. So, affordability there becomes a key factor for us, especially when we're developing new systems.
Well, that certainly is easy to jump on. One of the challenges, I think, with a huge organization, as you speak, is not just the affordability, but the mass, the scale that you need to represent in order to effectively get a soldier trained appropriately. And I think, General Brito, that synthetic training environment is obviously a place where you can capitalize on it. What do you think about the synthetic training, and how does that help you execute your doctrine and give you feedback for the building of additional requirements?
Well, certainly. Before I go specifically to that question, you mentioned the challenges of mass. I would like to offer what we've learned, one, working with our partners and across the other services and other commands within the Army, is the value of collaboration, clarity of what you need, and then sometimes experiments where you can test with a certain brigade or platoon on a capability and see if expanding that level of mass works, for one point. The great value of a synthetic training environment, it pulls together the outcomes of live, virtual, constructive capabilities that are important for our United States Army and our soldiers. And I would offer this up the same for a joint force. It allows you to test capabilities in a synthetic environment. And I'd like to also mention, we have a bazillion young soldiers that join the services, young service members that join the service, of course, soldiers that join the Army. These young soldiers, I've noticed, just unique to the command, get it. They pick up on the virtual capabilities. Joysticks and keyboards are not a challenge. So why not leverage the technology that can come with a synthetic training environment, and it helps you build up towards, one, going to combat, larger scale operations, the CTC operations, and you can enable it to get better at home station training. So just put yourself in a setting. You're in a sim center at Fort Itsec, so it doesn't matter where you're at. So what the STE can give us is the terrain reality of any part in the world in that training center. You can see it. The capabilities that a existing or a future piece of equipment can give you, and you can attest on that in that training environment as well. Part of a gated training strategy gets you to a dirt training scenario. Not in of itself. You can kind of build, you can build on each other. The capabilities that can give a platoon or a battalion commander, a company commander, to pull in all the enablers that he or she may have when deployed in a synthetic training environment. And I'll give one example if you can just kind of paint the picture here. I was visiting some event AIT training not too long ago at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. And I actually sat in the simulator for the first time, me, along with a specialist, who was much better, by the way, on bulldozer operations in a warehouse. And that simulation piece of kit allowed him, in this case, to train everything he would do, even if he were driving that in the desert somewhere, but didn't have the expense of blowing the track that he did in a simulator. Just couple that in a collective environment, and you can see the value of investing and continuing to train with everything the ST environment will give us, both now and in the future. And that'll make you better when you have to do it in the dirt as well, and when you deploy also. And I'll stop there.
Oh no, this is fabulous, because to me, I'm hearing all sorts of things that I could just play into for a conversation. I think, Honorable Bush, I think one of the things that is underscoring what the General is talking about is your data strategy. In order to be able to do and collect to inform improvements to TTP or to readiness or to just basic training to get to your MOS is this concept of synthetic training. And oh, by the way, it might provide an opportunity to occlude our TTP, reveal or conceal from adversaries. In terms of where you think we are there any limitations or impasses that you're seeing in terms of collecting the data, utilizing the data, creating that data strategy and making it happen?
So I wouldn't say impediments. I think we have to be good partners with industry as we do this. So it is a new model. We do now value data kind of the way we would. It's almost, it has a value. It's something we both need to not just generate as we train, but also then use later to either train systems, train AI, or better understand ourselves. And we on the government side need to be good partners, work with industry, make sure it's fair arrangements we have, make sure we're clear up front about our needs to retain and use data generated by systems we're developing with industry, while not going to the max extent of some terms that have been thrown around in the past, which venture into really the government wanting to be completely in control and have complete access to all the IP and everything behind it.
Yeah.
So we've got to find that balance point with industry to make sure that we're being good partners, that industry can still be profitable while developing these systems with us, but at the same time getting access to the data and being able to use it, not just get it, but use it in a way that makes sense. So I think it's still early days. The Army's got a lot of new things coming out. Mr. Bang Young can talk a lot about our new data strategy and how we're taking a different approach. But I think we're on the right track, but I need feedback. I want to hear from industry about whether we are or not, because this is something we have to get right.
I think to hear from industry what you just said in terms of IP and how the future is going to have to be developed off the back of what we've learned in lessons, both active and synthetic, in other words, inside of training. I would hope that they would be able to pick up on that and start thinking about how can they offer the support that's needed to be able to do this. So I'm excited to hear the conversation lead that way. One of the things that came out of this short dialogue is also the scale at which the Army is. And when we're now full bore engaged in emotional, not bad emotion, but significantly energizing us because of the peers adversaries that we see on the horizon, I think that translates into really rethinking our training to your recent release, and both of the 3.0 and the 2.0, and also what is the foundation of our training for the future when we know our American soil is no longer given the distance that it used to have from being able to have an effect occur on soil, whether it's non-kinetic or kinetic. When we see the impacts of the next generation of warfare, how do you think, General, MedCom and other entities would, like Army Corps of Engineers, other elements of the Army, play into this new world of training? And what are you seeing happening, and what are you leading into this change?
Well, certainly, that's a very important question, and a relatively difficult one, of which we're tackling. So specifically on those commands, I want to back up a little bit. It's extremely important. I'm not tying this to the doctrine. I'll call it old school thinking, is to fully understand the threat capabilities of what our adversary can do. And as you mentioned, whether it may be kinetic or maybe non-kinetic. It may be the impact of information operations. It may be what cyber can do to you without pulling a single bullet. And then the extended reach both ways, both for us as a joint force and the adversary as well, in this multi-domain, multiple MDO environment. So what you may be touching on is the mass and scale of, one, how we conduct medical operations to a scale we might not have seen before. Same with replacement operations. And all of that can be, and it brings in the value specifically to your question, when you receive the input of the Army Corps of Engineers, the Medical Command or Medical Center of Excellence, those that work personnel then bring in their insight, and you develop training scenarios, all of which can be replicated, the threat capacity that I just mentioned. It could be in a DIRT CTC rotation, it could be in a simulations environment, it could be both. It could be, and it is, in this respect, the warfighting exercises that we give for divisions and corps to replicate our capabilities against those replicated threats. So the conveniences, for lack of a better word, that we may have had in projecting forward may have changed. The ability of our adversaries, either kinetic or non-kinetic, to impact our ports of embarkation on this side of the pond is something that we must consider. And I know as a service, Army, and I know the Joint Force as well, through some of the experimentation and warfighting exercises we're doing, are replicating what that could be. Someone playing the red team. My own unit, TRADOC G2, helps to do that. Matter of fact, just recently, did that supporting a naval exercise. So you can see the extended, replicate the capabilities of our adversary, and yet ours as well against them. And that's extremely important at this point. And I actually hope we never have to see a large-scale casualty operation or personal replacement. But we must train for it at scale at home station training and our combat training centers, and much larger in our warfighting exercises and experimentation and our joint exercises as well with our partners. And one last comment, if I may. It's equally as important, and this ties to Dr. Honorable Bush's comment, and sharing the requirements with the industry of what we may need to offer that level of clarity, to help us maintain that overmatch. This is not, it shouldn't be a fair fight. That's not the goal you want.
Right.
It's a matter of overmatch and always maintaining that overmatch, whether it's achieved through the synchronization of material and everything else, or training. Thank you.
Oh, excellent. And it leads towards, I've got wonderfully great questions, and it leads to one that follows. You started down the path, and I'm going to leverage it, and it can be for either of you to talk more about, but we cannot play the next big game solo as an Army. It's going to be joint, and it's going to be international. And there is a lot of activity talking about international. How do you see us being able to get our own act in order, but also be interoperable and integrated and trained to be able to fight side by side, both organically to the US and internationally?
Want me to start, or
Either in the material solution or in the requirement space, either way.
I think better to start with the requirements, although I could lead with, we come to our partners, international partners, we used to be the only ones with training systems. We used to be the only ones who had some of the networking capability, but now a lot of them have it too. So we have to, it's not just imposing the US Army or the US military's view on our allies in terms of how we're going to operate together. So it's gotten more iterative, and I have more conversations with my counterparts about how to acquire these systems. I think one thing I want to hit on, the General mentioned, our US military, not just the Army, two of our hidden superpowers that come out when there's a conflict, one is logistics, the other one is actually training. We show up with logistics at scale, and more importantly, highly trained people. And you see the difference on the battlefield. And I think you're seeing now in some of the conflicts we're involved in, supporting allies, what a lack of training results in. So, everything we do in the Army is ultimately making sure that from a material standpoint, that when soldiers do go to combat, they can succeed. And providing training systems is probably, we have to have things that work in combat, but we also have to be able to train them. As a young officer, I saw how the two came together, and no one does it better than us, in my opinion. But we have to maintain that overmatch, as the General said, in the area of training. It's just as important as every other area we do.
If I may expand on that, we concur with all at every echelon. So I know our service, I know the other services do as well. We have partners, we have partner nations we work with, we have partner services that we work with as well. Sharing some of our very own schools at the very individual level. So building that relationship, both in understanding of doctrine, application of lessons learned, and how we fight as a joint partner, as a coalition partner. It starts at the individual level and obviously can work up through the respective echelons. Pulling on a string that Honorable Bush mentioned, I'm very excited and to have seen this over the last couple of years and know it's going to continue to get better in the years ahead. Some of the joint training exercises, not only with the other services, but some of the agencies in the government that could be supporting things as well. And that's critical. Those who provide logistics who may not be wearing a uniform of some type, it's critical as well. That's at a respective echelon. You're not going to do it every weekend, of course, but those exercises can be planned, and I know they're being executed now. We've all seen them. And I'm sure I can speak to every service represented here today, probably have somebody deployed outside the continent of the United States doing something, and it helps to focus on that level of interoperability. I've also, from some previous experience at one of our combat training centers, where we had both services and allied partners training, you might learn the capabilities you don't have in a respective system when it comes to interoperating together. And that's also good in that training environment. You can weave it back into the system and see what needs to be fixed. Again, that highlights the importance of the collaboration and communications. Thank you.
Excellent. So we can build things, and then we have this challenge in this new environment, this digital engineering environment, all the things attributable to non-material, non-hardware, you can't touch or feel it. A lot of the questions are coming in. I'm going to try to paraphrase with one question, and it actually has a part for both of you, and it is, okay, we've built it. How do we test it? How do we get that verification and validation without slowing us down too far? Are there thoughts that you all have about how we can, as we learn to use this new tool, call it artificial intelligence, call it digital engineering, call it whatever nomenclature you'd like, but what it is hard and it's new for us because we're just entering into this new world. What do you think are the tools that we have, soldiers, technology?
So in the area of AI, our ability to test it starts with our ability to understand it. So the Army's got efforts underway, the other services do as well, to build our capacity to fully ingest, understand how they've been developed, and actually make sure we understand what we're being offered or what we're proposing to use in the area of AI. Now, we'll go at different speeds here. So use of AI across, for example, management activities of the Army, the business of the Army. I expect those to go very fast because industry is already moving there. And there's many ways we can use AI tools like industry does to be more efficient and more productive. It gets a little more difficult when you get into things that are operational. So, for example, an intelligence AI tool that helps us do targeting. Well, we have to understand how that was developed, what data set it was trained on, what its biases might be. Because ultimately, an intel system like that for targeting is going to get linked eventually to the use of lethal force. And that is not something we are in a position now, and our current policy is not to turn that over to a computer. A person still has to decide when to take another life. So our ability and what we need to do is make sure that we can keep up with the amazing innovation in that space and start to build the capacity in the government to be effective partners and go quickly rather than just relying entirely on what we're being told something is. But that's on us. The government has to develop that expertise, so we're partners with industry and informed partners. On the software side, I think we need a little more risk tolerance, frankly. We have I think the Army might be unique in we have a material release process that we've applied to software. Sometimes it makes sense, other times it just doesn't, and we need to take a little more industry approach to where we get software out. Kind of the testing often happens with the operational force, not an artificial test environment. We have to be comfortable with that. We can do it the right way. We've done it on several new big software initiatives where we roll it out in stages rather than trying to test it perfectly. So I think we just have to get more comfortable with doing it, testing differently. You're never going to be able to test all the certainties. one caveat to that, and we are making strides here, is cyber testing, just to make sure what we're providing soldiers is secure. So that is something where, working with industry, I think we've got an ability to use advanced cyber tools to make sure we're testing things in advance of them going to the field. It does take time, but we have to do that because, you know, a private sector system that's got some cyber vulnerabilities can be an inconvenience, but a system that's going to go in the hands of soldiers who would have to go to combat potentially, it's not an inconvenience. Now it's a risk of their life. So we have to be as good as possible at that early and upfront.
I think your point about the advancement and the speed at which this is happening is really critical. And it's in particularly, I think the word conflab was used earlier in a dialogue, and I love that word, so I'm going to use it. It's a conflab for us to be able to fit that into the profile of how we currently equip, train, recruit, et cetera. And I would like to think that we have a path for taking a look at what tools that can we appropriately use in the terms of our ethics, morals, the way we think as a nation, and still be able to keep up with what's coming. One of the areas that I have a ton of questions about is recruiting. And are we thinking of new ways of going actively out to recruit? And does any of the tools that you're seeing that are coming out in terms of training or if you would, evaluating possible areas for recruiting and recruiting of individuals coming to the fore in your mind, General?
Well, certainly, that's a very good question. And I would like, first of all, I want to caveat up front, our Army has maintained its qualification standards and entry standards for the soldiers, have not lowered that standard whatsoever, which is great. And up front, I mentioned in my opening remarks as a #1 line of effort of sessions in support of Headquarters DA, Department of the Army, of course, and our piece of the pipeline break. But to your point, in maintaining the quality soldier that we want to bring into the United States Army, we also see that some future capabilities tied, I believe the comment Honorable Bush mentioned, was amazing innovation. So we realize now, both in the current force, that we need to step up the game a bit, and we are, in training some data literacy components, the need for coders and software engineers and others out there in the force today to maintain that fighting edge. Fast forward to recruiting, specifically tied to your question. We also know and assess, based off known requirements and forecasting future requirements, the type of soldier that we need to bring in. That could very well mean, and we're doing this, on college campuses and other places, recruiting or cyber fairs of some type, the type of soldier that shows that propensity and skill to come in and do that job. That may not be needed for another 4 or 5 years, and groom him or her throughout the pipeline to give that type of soldier that we need. As important for the tank driver and infantry soldier as well. Well, those future force capabilities that are known now, and they come out in that team sport analysis, allows us to go out and recruit that type of soldier that we need. I'd like to tie one other point to that. When they're in, they go through basic combat training, AIT as well. It's as important for this command, training doctor command, I'm sure the sister services do it also, to update the training that we give them to be proficient on that system, to be retrained and recertified on that system, and perhaps forecast what's going out in that system. It could be a lethal piece of kit. It could be the next software system of the future, and all that needs to be trained as well. So this is very, I like to say oversimplified it, but it's pretty complicated. And not only bringing in the quality soldier that shows the propensity and that talent, but reinforce and build that talent throughout his or her enlistment or their career.
Excellent. I only have one question, and I'm trying in my mind to pick out which one of these fabulous questions makes the best sense to ask.
Let's do the speed round. Come on.
We got it.
I would like actually to give you both gentlemen an opportunity for last remarks, and I think it would be best if we could take a look at it through the future lens and through the concept of small business and large business teaming, because I think a lot of the training advances are being made in software and tools that are new, and you're involved in them. And I think Project Convergence is an area where we're trying a lot of activities out in this new environment. So I'd like to give you both a couple minutes to sort of say what your thoughts are to industry and to the population, because we've got a mix of both international, government, and industry people here.
Sure. First one, I want to circle back on something I mentioned. You know, I've worked in government a lot of my life, worked in the Pentagon only recently, but I am conscious that we are sometimes known for doing the classic government thing of telling you all what the answer is to our problems. That shouldn't be the case, especially not in this field, and especially not in anything digital. We need to take advantage of the innovation in the private sector in this space. And specific to training, for example, is anyone in here with a teenager, you know, I got one and I got one 20-year-old. To put it mildly, they spend a lot of time in a digital environment. They spend a lot of time gaming. That's a good thing. And their expectations are pretty high for when they join the Army about what experience they're going to have with training. But all of the private sector innovation behind that, we need to leverage into our training systems, because no, it's not gaming, it's training, but there are links between those two worlds, and we have to bring them together. There's amazing innovation we should take advantage of. So that'd be number one. The other one is we in the government need to be a good partner. You know, we are, I know, a demanding customer. We have a lot of rules. You know, that's not all our doing in the executive branch. I get a little help from that on Congress. But some of those rules, for example, with contracting, thank you for your patience, working with us. But, you know, it's the American people's money. So, yeah, there's going to be a little more rules. But we need to be good partners with you to make sure we can contract quickly and get things moving at a rate that's relevant to your business. And I think what we need is feedback on just how we can do that better. We are trying to be more streamlined. We are trying to use new tools. But at the same time, we need your partnership in industry to both give us ideas on what we can do better, but also tell us how we can do things better. Because you know, America's great innovation engine is the private sector. It is not the government. And we need ideas. We need energy. We need new things. We need to be critiqued the right way, so we are better partners to work with industry, not working at cross purposes. So if I have one big message that underlies a lot of what we do, trying to do an acquisition, is that we have to do this together. The government can't do it all alone. And then to bring it back to this area of training, I think there's enormous potential for us to leverage great work going on in the digital space in particular, so that we don't have, you know, we don't have to start everything from scratch. We should be able to build on what's already out there, and I hope that's happening.
Thank you.
Thank you. The only thing I would add to that, and I think the composition of this audience shows the amazing opportunities we really have, both in uniform and industry partners, and of course those representing the respective staffs of the services. You asked an earlier question of ways to continue to train that. I'll give this through my operational lens, because I'm obviously in the Army here. But the value of communications, the statement we made a couple of times throughout this, the teamwork, you can lay out soldier touch points to test respective capabilities. We need to be extremely clear and precise in requirements or problem sets that we ask industry to help us solve and test those solutions. And before you go too far down the pipeline or invest a lot of money and time or intellectual energy, test those solutions. If it doesn't work, then you pivot left, you pivot right. We're doing some great work with that now with our network systems, which also would benefit the service and other services as well, fighting as part of the joint force. So given that level of detail in the plan and the respective training that supports you, is very much the output of a team sport here that comes with a collaboration. Of course, you have the financial investments. We have rules that we have to follow, which mostly helpful most of the time, but again, that needs to be simply discussed. And those soldier touch points, opportunities to pivot, opportunities to reinvest, and then leveraging the intellectual energy that I'm looking at here and capacity here to see what 2040 might require and back up. And then respective to command, linking in all the Dotland PF requirements so that when it comes out, I'm trained and ready for it. I'm not seeing it for the first time when I'm deployed at a FOB in Afghanistan. And we have moved beyond that as an Army and are in a joint force. I'm excited to see where we're going in 2030 and 2040. Thank you.
Thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, if we could thank our panelists for such a great job. Mr. Doug.
Thank you. A little notes there. Thank you, Doctor. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Bush.
Thanks, Hank.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Well, thank you, Honorable Katrina McFarland, Honorable Douglas Bush, and General Gary Ambrito for a terrific and thought-provoking fireside chat. Let's give them another round, please. Next, I'd like to introduce our academic keynote, Dr. Doug Bowman, the Frank J. Mayer Professor of Computer Science and Director of the Center for Human-Computer Interaction at Virginia Tech. Dr. Bowman received his undergraduate degree in mathematics and computer science from Emory University in 1994, and his MS and PhD in computer science from the Georgia Institute of Technology in 1997 and 1999, respectively. Dr. Bowman leads the 3D Interaction Group focusing on the topics of user experience in virtual reality and augmented reality. He received the prestigious National Science Foundation Career Award for his work on 3D interaction, and this award is only given out to less than 5% of those who apply for it. Dr. Bowman does a lot of work for the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, or the IEEE as most of us know it. He served in many roles for the IEEE Virtual Reality Conference, including the Program Chair, General Chair, and Steering Committee Chair. He also co-founded the IEEE Symposium on 3D User Interfaces, now part of the IEEE VR Conference. Dr. Bowman received the Technical Achievement Award from the IEEE Visualization and Graphics Technical Committee in 2014, and the Career Impact Award from the IEEE International Symposium on Mixed and Augmented Reality, better known as ISMAR, which is one of the most prestigious computer graphics conferences in the whole world. Dr. Bowman has also been named a Distinguished Scientist by the Association for Computing Machinery, or the ACM, and is a co-founder, or excuse me, and a co-author of the book, 3D User Interfaces, Theory and Practice. And finally, Dr. Bowman leads the Center for Human-Computer Interaction, an interdisciplinary coalition of more than 60 faculty at Virginia Tech. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Dr. Doug Bowman.
Thank you very much. I've never been played in that way before with the Hokie fight song, so hopefully there's some Hokies out there that were singing. So thank you very much for the kind introduction. I'm greatly honored to be here today. This is a great community. I have great respect for the work that's done here across all the different services and industry members and academic members who are here. I want to thank the conference organizers, especially Dr. Elliot Weiner, for their support and their trust in me to give this industry keynote today. Dr. Weiner was extremely helpful with insights on the community and what might be helpful, so thank you, Elliot. So, I'm going to be talking about lessons learned from 15 years of basic research on immersive training and tactical AR. And I want to start with a little bit of my own story, so if you'll indulge me. As Elliot said, I finished my undergrad in 1994 and immediately went to grad school at Georgia Tech, where I was first introduced to virtual reality by Dr. Larry Hodges, who's pictured here. And I remember the first VR demo that I had was this virtual elevator that you see on the top right of the slide. The computer graphics were pretty poor. The head-mounted display and the tracking system were laughable by today's standard. But when I went up in this virtual elevator, I felt my knees shake, and something happened in my stomach. And I realized that virtual reality was a technology that had a potential to be a real game changer. It was a medium that was unlike anything that we had before. So that demo led to me doing my PhD work on virtual reality, and I finished my PhD dissertation on 3D interaction in '99 and started as an assistant professor at Virginia Tech immediately after that, where I've been my whole career. As Elliot mentioned, I continued this 3D interaction work and published a book, 3D User Interfaces. But really the story that I wanted to tell today started in 2006 when I began a research agenda on the benefits of immersion in VR. And it's a really important question because virtual reality as a technology was very unproven at the time, and there was a lot of skepticism as well as a lot of excitement about its use. So we needed to understand, are there benefits of this technology? And because of that research agenda, I did a sabbatical at UC Santa Barbara in the 2008-2009 academic year because they had this amazing facility called the Alisphere. I don't know if anybody has seen the Alisphere, but it's hard to take a picture of it, but you see it here on the bottom right. It's a 3-story high spherical display. It's got an amazing spatial sound system, and it's truly the definition of what it means to be immersed in a virtual environment. So while I was there, working at UCSB and with the Alisphere, I was working with my colleague, Dr. Tobias Hollerer, in the UCSB Computer Science Department. He's pictured here on the upper left. And both of us received an email that was sent out to our research community mailing list by Roy Stripling, a former program officer at the Office of Naval Research. He's shown here on the upper right. And the call was for something called Immersive Sciences. So Immersive Sciences was supposed to be about basic research on fundamental aspects of the use of these immersive technologies, with special attention on the relevance of these technologies for military training and simulation. In other words, the goal was to develop fundamental theories and knowledge that could serve as the foundation for applied research and innovation in immersive technology for this community. So Dr. Hollerer and I submitted a white paper, and we were awarded a grant in 2009 from the ONR Human Performance Training and Education Program. And that grant was evaluating the effects of immersion on naval training applications. So as you can see, every few years since, we've continued to submit and receive new awards from this program. And most of this work has been funded by Dr. Peter Squire, who's here this week. And I really want to thank him for his vision and leadership in having an understanding of what fundamental research we need to do to make these technologies useful and practical for this community. So I wanted to acknowledge Dr. Squire and also Dr. Hollerer, who's been a part of all of this work, as well as all the students whose work I'm going to talk about today. So the first 3 awards that we received were really kind of on the topic of immersive training, which we've heard about a lot this morning already. And the 3rd award started to get into, additionally, the area of how to use augmented reality in an operational environment. And the following awards have been focused on that as well. So in the few minutes that I have this morning, I wanted to focus on what we've learned about these two topics. So first, immersive training. So the question that we really have been guided by in all of the immersive training research that we've done is, does immersion have benefits for training? And this, again, is an important question, because if we're going to use these new unproven technologies, we need to know that we can actually measure quantitatively some benefit over existing approaches to training. So to answer this question about immersion, of course, we need to understand what we're asking. And so I've put the definition of immersion here on the slide that we've been using. We don't think of immersion as a subjective feeling. Instead, we think of it as an objective level of fidelity of the virtual experience. So how faithful, how realistic is the virtual experience compared to the real-world experience that you're simulating? So that allows us to reframe our question. We could say, instead of does immersion have benefits for training, we could say, does making the training experience more like the real-world experience that one is training for result in measurably better outcomes? So since immersion is on a continuum, according to this definition, and since many things contribute to it, there are also other questions that we can ask, like how much immersion do we need for effective training? Or what specific components of immersion are the most beneficial? And even, do some levels of immersion have negative effects? So let me talk about this idea first of components of immersion. So there's many elements of a virtual reality or augmented reality system that can increase its fidelity, both through hardware and software. So here's an incomplete list of such components. So for example, one can make training higher fidelity by increasing the field of view of the display to be closer to the human field of view, or by making the models of virtual objects have greater detail, or by making the way that the user manipulates virtual objects closer to the way that we manipulate objects in the real world. So it's helpful, I think, to classify these components. And so we identified 3 categories of immersion by analyzing the user system loop that's shown here. And those categories first include display fidelity. So this is probably the easiest one to think about. For example, the Google Cardboard and the Vario XR3 are both immersive VR displays. But of course, the Vario has a much higher fidelity in terms of things like field of view and resolution, among other components. So display fidelity is one category. A second category is interaction fidelity. For example, if we use an omnidirectional treadmill, like shown on the right here, for locomotion, that's much more like navigating through the real world than it is to use arrow keys on a keyboard to move around. And finally, on the top, we can increase immersion by improving the fidelity of the virtual scenario, the simulated scenario. For example, the virtual scene on the left has, on the right, excuse me, has better geometric detail, better lighting, better textures, and so on. So, with those categories in mind, we can reshuffle our list of immersion components to see examples of VR/AR system components that fall in each category. More importantly, this provides us a systematic way to study and evaluate various ways to improve the fidelity of training systems, and to evaluate the contributions that different individual components of immersion make to the overall benefits of immersion. So that was some theory. With that theoretical framing in mind, let me briefly discuss a few examples of the studies that we've done to understand the effects of immersion on training systems. So first, this is a study from 2010, so please forgive the quality of the graphics. But in this study, we evaluated how field of view and field of regard, both components of display fidelity, can affect people's ability to learn and recall complex spatial procedures. We trained them in virtual reality, as shown on the left, and we assessed training transfer in the real world, as shown on the right. They basically had to move these objects around and put them in specific locations on a numbered board. And we found that having a wider field of view and a wider field of regard during training improved both accuracy and recall significantly during the assessment. So this is clear evidence that higher fidelity displays can directly benefit training effectiveness. In another study published in 2015, we looked at a visual scanning training task. We trained users in virtual reality to follow a particular visual scanning strategy as they looked for threats in an urban environment. We found that, again, wider field of view was beneficial, causing users to perform better on the visual scanning training task. And in that same study, we also varied the scene's visual realism and looked at its effects. So this is a component of scenario fidelity. And these are examples of the 3 levels of visual fidelity that we studied. We found that if users trained at a higher level of visual realism, as shown on the right, their performance in a simulated real-world assessment task improved. So again, we have evidence that a higher level of scenario fidelity can improve training transfer. But not all of our studies revealed benefits of higher levels of immersion. In another study in 2015, we looked at the fidelity of locomotion techniques when navigating through a virtual environment. And one of our conditions was the virtue sphere, which you can see in the video here. It's a locomotion device that allowed users to physically walk in any direction for any distance in the virtual environment. However, as you can see in the video, the movements of the user with the virtue sphere were often tentative and unnatural due to its weight and inertia. So we compared the virtue sphere, which has a medium level, I would say, of locomotion fidelity, to both a low fidelity technique that just used a gamepad, a typical kind of Xbox controller, and to a high fidelity technique of physically walking through a large tract space. And as you can see in these plots, the virtue sphere was significantly worse in terms of both accuracy and speed measures. So that led us to hypothesize that for interaction fidelity in particular, there might be an uncanny valley effect, in which moderate levels of interaction fidelity have negative impacts on effectiveness. The basis of this hypothesis is that when interaction techniques present themselves as being realistic, but they have important differences from real-world interactions, users try to interact using their natural skills, their existing skills. And that doesn't work well with these medium fidelity techniques. Therefore, the upper bound of effectiveness for medium interaction fidelity techniques might be lower than the upper bound for both high fidelity techniques as well as low fidelity techniques, which can be effective when designed well. So I had a student, Mahdi Nabiyuni, who for part of his PhD dissertation did a meta-analysis from the literature of whether this hypothesis might be true. And without going into the details, you can see here that what he found is pretty much in line with our hypothesis. Okay, so let me summarize with a plot, kind of the total sum of what we found about the benefits of immersion for training. The results I'm going to illustrate here come from 25 different publications, about 28, I believe, different experiments over 15 years. And so it's a complicated plot, so let me give you a couple of examples first of how it works. So this first line that I'm showing shows that we had 4 results saying that for a spatial understanding task in VR, high display fidelity was significantly better than low display fidelity. For example, it might be that stereo was better than non-stereo for a spatial judgment task. And here's another example. I'm coloring it in red because it's a negative example. And this line shows that we had 2 results that for a visual search task, moderately high display fidelity was significantly worse than low display fidelity. And these results were both about simulator sickness. When we showed people a higher fidelity display, some people got more sick than if the display was lower fidelity. So now let me show all the results for display fidelity and also some results for interaction fidelity and just a couple of results for scenario fidelity. And you can see that overall we have very good evidence that higher fidelity is better across many different tasks, different components of fidelity, and different measures of effectiveness. There's not many negative effects of higher levels of immersion, but they do exist. I mentioned the simulator sickness results and also the issue with moderate fidelity locomotion devices that I talked about earlier. So it's not uniformly positive, but it's overall very positive. All right, so let me move on to tactical AR for a few minutes. So this is the second theme of our work, which is about the use of head-worn augmented reality systems by warfighters in the field for operations. And there's several reasons why AR has great potential for this application, including the ability to access information hands-free, the possibility of maintaining better situation awareness because you're not looking at a device, and the potential to augment the real world to improve perception, understanding, and integration of digital and physical information. Despite this potential, of course, there are significant challenges to bringing this technology to bear during operations. So some of those challenges, which many of you might be working on, are just making the hardware good enough. It needs to be light, it needs to be powerful, it needs to be robust. But other challenges that I'm going to talk about are related to the experience of using such systems for real work. So let me briefly touch on some of the basic research we've done to address those challenges. One basic challenge for outdoor AR systems is spatial perception. Because the AR system doesn't always have an up-to-date and detailed model of the real world, virtual objects might not be correctly occluded by real objects. So consider this video showing the case where one user's gaze direction is visualized for a second user, which might be important for joint attention during tactical operations. As you can see, without occlusion cues, it's very difficult to judge which of the pillars the other user is looking at. And we actually can't see which pillar it is until our view is very close to the other user's view, which is not very useful. So our solution was to have the user indicate both the top and the bottom of the object of interest, so that we can display a double ray that brackets the object visually. And that's much easier, as you can see here. We also designed a parallel bars visualization to help the observer understand the orientation of the gaze ray in space. We did an experiment run outdoors with real AR systems, and we discovered that the double ray approach in particular had significant positive benefits for both speed and accuracy for the observer, and only added a little bit of workload to the pointer. We've also been working on approaches for displaying and interacting with information for tactical AR. We call our approach glanceable AR. And the idea, as illustrated here, and this is more of kind of a business or knowledge work scenario in the illustrations, but the idea is to put AR information displays in the periphery so that the user can access them at a glance, but at the same time, the information stays out of the way to limit distraction, occlusion, or interference with the real world. We've run many studies about different aspects of glanceable AR, but let me just highlight a couple in the remaining time I have. So first, we asked users to evaluate 4 different configurations. We compared configurations where information was always visible on a heads-up display to those where information was off-screen in the periphery, but accessible with a head turn. We also compared showing the full information display to showing only an icon of the app, which could be selected to reveal the full information display. And overwhelmingly in this study, users preferred placing the information outside the field of view and displaying the apps as icons initially, because this configuration interfered the least with what they were doing in the real world. So a consequence of this is that we now need an effective and easy way for users to activate the apps in order to reveal their information. So we studied 5 different activation interfaces, as shown in this video, for both sitting and walking scenarios. The first interface is kind of the current standard, which is based on dwell time. You look at the app for a certain amount of time to activate it. The second interface is blink. We use the eye tracker to sense a double blink to activate the app. Third, we tested fixation glance, which actually measures not only gaze direction, but also gaze depth using the eye tracker. Fourth, we used hand overlap. We placed the hand behind the information to reveal it. And finally, we used head depth, where the user leans backward to activate the information. So we found that in our study, for the sitting task, many of these techniques worked equally well, as you might expect. But when users were mobile and walking around and having to interact with the real world while they were walking, fixation glance and blink were by far the fastest and most preferred. And I think this is really promising for tactical AR scenarios when there's lots of movement. And we only want to use eye movements to interact with the system. So those are just some examples, but I think you can see the sorts of challenges that we have when we're designing user experiences for tactical AR. So let me conclude by offering some overall reflections on these 15 years of research with immersive training in tactical AR. So first, for immersive training, as we saw, immersive technologies, both VR and AR, do have measurable benefits for training performance and for transfer. And there's some guidelines that designers of immersive systems should follow. And there's many of these, but 2 examples that we talked about today are prioritizing wide field of view and field of regard, along with natural head and body movements, and being careful with semi-natural locomotion devices. On the tactical AR side, I believe more than ever that AR has the potential to transform operations and to replace existing digital devices, not only in the military domain, but also other domains, and even for just everyday life of consumers. But successfully deploying these tactical AR systems is not just about hardware specs. Even when we achieve an eyeglasses form factor, an all-day battery life, and excellent performance, careful design of the software that delivers the user experience is crucial. And so I showed some examples of that. And then finally, I want to share some overall lessons learned, and I'm almost out of time. But first, I want to stress the importance of fundamental research, not only at academic institutions, but also in DoD basic research labs and other places. We really need to understand not only how to build these technologies and how to make them work, but how to design these technologies to be most effective for the tasks that we care about. And these goals require the development of theoretical frameworks and the careful design and analysis of basic scientific experiments, which can only be done in a fundamental research setting. Secondly, I want to emphasize the importance of collaboration and exchange between DoD agencies and universities, and also with companies in industry. There's a whole ecosystem of funders and fundamental researchers and applied researchers and product developers, and all of them really need to work together in order to advance immersive science and its application to achieve real-world results that we all want. And finally, I'd like to say that although fundamental research often results directly in just scholarly publications, it does have a significant impact on the tech industry as a whole. I talked about my sabbatical at UC Santa Barbara, but I didn't mention my other sabbatical, which was at Apple in 2015-16. And when I was working at Apple, I really saw firsthand how this basic research on the fundamental aspects of these technologies is having a direct impact on what's being developed at big tech companies. The most recent example, of course, is the Apple Vision Pro, which will be a consumer AR/VR device, and whose design and applications were directly influenced by basic research in the field, including work funded by the DoD agencies represented here at Itsec. So this means that fundamental research is making our warfighters safer and more effective, and at the same time leading to advancements that can benefit all people in their work and personal lives. So thanks very much for your attention and for the kind invitation to speak today. I hope you have some food for thought from this talk today as we think about the future of immersive technologies for education, training, and operations. I look forward to continued conversation with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bowman. I would now like to introduce and hand things over from NDIA, the Honorable David Norquist, President and Chief Executive Officer. Honorable Norquist.
All right, good morning. Thank you for being here today. I want to begin by offering my war thanks to our Fireside chat speakers, Secretary Bush and General Brito, for taking the time out of their very busy schedules to be with us here today. I also like to thank our industry keynote speaker, Dr. Bowman, for providing his insightful perspectives, which we'll all take home and apply over the holiday weekends coming up with our kids' toys to now understand how we actually can use them better. We have a lot of events coming up for you today, so I'm now going to do the first training part of the training, which is if you have not downloaded the app, take out your phone. I will not be offended. Take out your phone and stare at it now. This is the polite part. And what I want you to do is make sure you go to the App Store, in whether you're an Apple or Android, and type in I/ITSEC 2023. That will download the app that will list for you all the range of activities that will be going on over the course of this week. And there are way too many. If I tried to list them, you would lose your entire break. So I will skip that part and ask you to take advantage of reading them. You'll see the exhibitions, the customize your agenda, you can connect to social media channels. It's especially useful if you want to plan where you want to be to make sure you don't miss key events or key speakers. A lot of these sessions are being recorded, so should you discover that things are happening in two places at once and we don't have our cloning technology working yet, it'll be posted online, and after the fact you can get to see what you want to see. With that, let me wrap up the opening ceremony by saying thank you, enjoy the coffee and networking break, see you back here for the senior leader panel at 10:30. Thank you all very much.